The morning sun reflected like molten gold across the polished windows of Hawthorne Aerospace, where private jets worth hundreds of millions of dollars rested in perfect silence. Mechanics moved with quiet precision, executives hurried across the runway with coffee in their hands, and billion-dollar decisions were made before most people had even finished breakfast. But on that bright, ordinary-looking day, something happened that would leave one of the country's most powerful CEOs humiliated, expose the value of honesty over arrogance, and remind everyone that respect can never be bought. Before we begin, if you believe kindness, integrity, and second chances still matter in today's world, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe so you never miss another heartfelt story that proves compassion is stronger than power. Elias Mercer had never expected life to become easy after losing his wife. Every sunrise began the same way. He woke before dawn, prepared breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter Nora, packed her school lunch, braided her long brown hair the best he could after watching countless online tutorials, and then drove across town to the independent aircraft restoration hangar where he worked as one of the finest aviation engineers few people had ever heard of. His hands were rough from decades of rebuilding damaged aircraft, but they were gentle whenever he tied Nora's shoes or tucked her into bed each night. Money was always tight, yet love was never in short supply inside their tiny rented home. Across the city, Serena Ashcroft lived in a world completely different from Elias's. As the young CEO of Ashcroft Aviation Holdings, she had inherited an empire after her father's retirement and expanded it into one of the country's largest private aviation companies. Investors admired her confidence. Competitors feared her ruthless negotiations. Employees respected her intelligence but rarely saw her smile. She believed emotions complicated business and that every decision should be measured only by profit and efficiency. One clear Tuesday morning, disaster struck when Serena's prized executive jet suffered severe structural damage after an emergency landing caused hidden fatigue cracks inside the wing assembly. Insurance investigators estimated months of repairs, while rival companies quietly celebrated the possibility that Ashcroft Aviation might miss several international contracts. Serena demanded immediate solutions, but every major repair facility either lacked the expertise or refused the impossible deadline. That was when someone recommended Elias Mercer. The modest mechanic walked through the executive hangar carrying nothing more than a worn leather toolbox and decades of experience. Some executives exchanged doubtful looks after seeing his faded work clothes and aging pickup truck parked outside. Serena barely glanced at him before explaining the impossible schedule. The aircraft had to fly again within 28 days or the company would lose negotiations worth hundreds of millions. Most engineers would have laughed. Elias simply studied the aircraft for several hours in complete silence. He crawled beneath the fuselage, inspected microscopic fractures, reviewed maintenance records, and examined every damaged component until sunset painted the runway orange. Finally, he presented a restoration plan that was so detailed and technically sound that even Ashcroft's senior engineering consultants admitted it might actually work. For the next 4 weeks, Elias practically lived inside the hangar. While others went home, he continued welding, measuring, rebuilding, recalibrating, and testing every critical system. His daughter Nora spent afternoons quietly doing homework in a small office corner, occasionally bringing her father sandwiches wrapped in paper towels because she knew he often forgot to eat. Everyone who watched them together saw not a struggling single father but a man determined to build a better future for the little girl who depended entirely on him. Slowly, the impossible became reality. The damaged aircraft transformed into what many mechanics privately called the finest restoration they had ever witnessed. Every structural repair exceeded manufacturer standards. Every inspection passed with remarkable precision. Independent aviation inspectors praised the craftsmanship, noting that the rebuilt jet was safer than many newly manufactured aircraft leaving the factory. The final invoice represented months of specialized labor, custom engineering, and around-the-clock dedication. For Elias, that payment meant clearing overdue rent, replacing Nora's broken bedroom heater before winter, and finally enrolling her in the science summer camp she had dreamed about ever since visiting an aviation museum. Instead, Serena rejected the invoice. She argued that the repair had exceeded the original estimated hours, insisted some procedures had been unnecessary, and claimed the company would only pay a fraction of the agreed contract. Her legal department immediately supported the decision, believing an independent mechanic lacked the resources to challenge a multinational corporation. Elias stood quietly holding the revised payment statement. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten lawsuits. He simply gathered his paperwork, thanked the accounting staff for their time, and walked away carrying the same old toolbox he had brought weeks earlier. That evening, Nora noticed something was wrong the moment her father sat silently at their tiny kitchen table without touching dinner. She placed her small hand over his weathered fingers, and although he tried smiling, the sadness in his eyes revealed everything. Years of hard work had been dismissed with a signature. The following morning, Ashcroft Aviation prepared the restored jet for its first executive flight. Everything appeared perfect. The engine started flawlessly. Ground systems reported no faults. Passengers boarded. Then something unexpected happened. The captain reviewed the maintenance records, recognized Elias Mercer's certification number, and quietly asked whether he had been fully compensated for the restoration work. After learning the truth from another mechanic, the veteran pilot calmly stood up, removed his headset, and refused to fly. Within an hour, the co-pilot did exactly the same. Replacement crews were contacted. Each one reached the same conclusion. Professional pilots understood something many executives did not. Aviation was built on trust. Every person boarding an aircraft trusted invisible professionals they would never meet. If a master engineer who had rebuilt the aircraft had been treated dishonorably after completing such critical work, many pilots questioned whether corporate management truly respected safety professionals or would one day pressure them to ignore concerns for financial reasons. News spread astonishingly fast through aviation circles. Maintenance crews talked. Flight engineers talked. Pilots talked. No union officially organized a boycott, yet one by one experienced captains politely declined assignments involving the aircraft until the payment dispute was resolved. Suddenly Serena's restored jet became the most expensive airplane sitting motionless on the runway. Clients grew impatient. Board members demanded explanations. International meetings were postponed. Financial losses climbed into millions of dollars every single day. For the first time in years, Serena realized that authority could command signatures but never genuine respect. One retired airline captain requested a private meeting with her. He explained that nobody doubted Elias's engineering. In fact, pilots trusted his craftsmanship completely. The real issue was character. If a company could refuse to honor an agreement with someone whose work literally protected human lives, what message did that send about every future safety decision? Those words echoed through Serena's mind long after the meeting ended. Unable to ignore the growing crisis, she quietly visited the small neighborhood where Elias lived. She expected anger. Instead, she found him kneeling beside Nora in their tiny front yard during a sunny afternoon, helping her build a simple model airplane from recycled cardboard. Father and daughter laughed every time the homemade wings bent the wrong way before patiently trying again. Their happiness existed without wealth, without luxury, and without bitterness. For the first time in many years, Serena felt ashamed. She saw a man who had poured extraordinary skill into saving her company while asking for nothing beyond the payment they had already agreed upon. She realized her decision had not been about protecting company finances. It had been about pride. The next morning, Serena called an emergency board meeting. In front of directors, executives, attorneys, and department heads, she admitted her mistake. She authorized immediate payment of the full invoice, added a substantial bonus for exceptional workmanship, publicly apologized to Elias Mercer, and announced a new corporate policy guaranteeing transparent payment protections for all independent contractors and maintenance specialists working with Ashcroft Aviation. When the funds reached Elias's account, he sat quietly for several minutes staring at the banking notification on his phone. Tears filled his eyes, not because he had become wealthy, but because justice had finally arrived. That evening he surprised Nora by registering her for the science academy she had always wanted to attend. Watching her excitement reminded him why he had never allowed bitterness to replace integrity. Only after the dispute was completely resolved did the pilots willingly return. The aircraft completed its first flight under brilliant blue daytime skies with flawless performance from takeoff to landing. The captain later remarked that every control response felt exceptionally smooth, quietly crediting the unseen craftsmanship beneath the polished exterior. Months later, Serena invited Elias to speak during the company's annual safety conference. Instead of discussing technical engineering, he spoke about responsibility. He reminded everyone that airplanes are not held together only by rivets and metal but by trust between every person who designs, repairs, inspects, and flies them. The audience stood in applause that lasted several minutes because they understood those words reached far beyond aviation. Nora eventually grew into a talented aerospace engineering student inspired by the sacrifices of the father who had never stopped believing that doing the right thing mattered, even when nobody seemed to notice. Serena transformed her leadership style as well, discovering that respect earned through humility was far stronger than fear earned through authority. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to Dad's Soul Diaries. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories that remind the world why honesty, kindness, and courage still matter. Special request: comment, respect earns trust. If you believe every hardworking person deserves fairness, dignity, and the reward they have honestly earned. Years later, people no longer remembered the financial losses or the delayed flights. They remembered something far more important. They remembered the single father who refused to sacrifice his integrity, the pilots who chose principles over convenience, and the CEO who found the courage to admit she was wrong before it was too late. In a world obsessed with power and money, their story became living proof that the strongest foundation is not built from steel or wealth, but from honor. Because at the end of every journey, whether on the ground or thousands of feet above the clouds, the safest path has always been the one guided by honesty, compassion, and the quiet courage to do what is right.